Welcome back, guys. I'm going to do a little piece here on soldering onto a switch with a wire as opposed to the breadboard soldering, which was in a different video. I'm also going to show you how to use some ShrinkTube in case you haven't done that yet. So let's imagine that I've got a switch here. This is one of the switches from Lab, and this has sort of been used before, so I'm kind of repurposing it, but it's just a simple toggle switch like we've used before. You'll notice there's a piece of red wire, and let's imagine that I wanted to connect that red wire to the switch. So the first thing I have to do is I'm going to have to strip that piece of wire. So I'm going to use my trusty wire trimmers. If you look very carefully, you'll notice that the gauge of the wire is written in numbers on the lower jaw. It runs from 20, and then there's a 22 and 24, and I know this is 22 gauge wire. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this wire right into the 22 gauge jaw, and if I clamp all the way down and pull, it does exactly the right thing. So it's really nice and simple. So not all the wire terminals will be labeled like that, but when they are, they're nice, and so you can make use of it. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to take my solder iron, and I've got it set up on pretty hot now. You'll notice that over here the setting is on 5. This is a larger object than with the breadboard, so I like to turn it up. I've also got my cleaning, sort of my Brillo pad here to make sure I keep my tip clean. That's always the case. And finally, I've got a heat gun here that I'm going to use when we get to the part where we put on the ShrinkTube. So let's go ahead, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I will get a little bit of solder. There's already some solder on this switch, and I'm going to go ahead and connect this up. So what I'll do is I'm going to heat up, and let me scroll in on this. So I'll heat up one side of this. Let me see if I can focus that a little bit better. That doesn't look too good. Okay, so that's a lot better. So if there's no solder there, then I'm going to get a little bit of solder on there, but I'm going to basically heat this up. Once I touch it, and if it's hot enough, I'm going to see it start to melt. And when it starts to melt, then I know I can take my lead. So it's starting to melt now, so I know there's a hole there in that solder, and so I'll get that basically in the hole just like that. I don't really like that, how that's connected. I don't feel like it looks that good, so what I'll do now is I'm going to come along and I'm going to heat up that lead right there, that terminal, with the soldering tip, and then I'll add a little bit of solder to it. So I'm bringing in some solder from the bottom, and you'll see that if I get everything nice and heated up, it'll flow right into again a little volcano like that, and that's a real nice looking solder joint right there. If it sort of balls up, or if you have a lot of dark or empty spaces on your solder joint, that's generally not a good thing, and so you don't want to redo that. So be careful about the good solder joints. You can also check them. Now the next thing I might want to do is cover this up. Sometimes you don't need to do this, but I'm going to do this for the purpose of demonstration. So let's imagine that I wanted to somehow get some insulation covering this wire right here. In this case, I'm not sure I need it, but in general, it's not a bad idea. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get a little ShrinkTube, and that's what this is. You'll see it comes in 2 different diameters. I think this larger size will be just fine, so I'm going to cut a little piece off with my snippers. So I've got some scissors or some cutters, and I'll just cut a little piece off there. And then I'll thread this onto the red wire and all the way up until it covers that joint. And you'll see that I've got it pushed up on there nicely at this point, so that it's covering up the bare wire, and it covers up the solder joint. So hint, if your solder joints aren't so great but they work, you can cover them up with this. But then I'll take my heat gun. My heat gun then is going to do exactly what it says. I'm going to go ahead and turn this on, and I'll kind of hold it down where the solder joint is, and maybe I'll get a little closer. You can see this thing. So this black stuff is called ShrinkTube, and hopefully you can see that as I'm heating it up, it's in fact shrinking down onto the wire. It makes a really nice connection, and that takes it from being bush league to real nice high quality. So that's a pretty good looking joint right there that's been soldered up and shrink wrapped, and I appreciate you watching.